So, in the last episode, we broke down what sin actually is. Not just rules, not just don't do this, don't do that, but misalignment. Stepping outside of design, missing the mark. And once you really sit with that, it changes the way you see everything. Because now the question isn't just, what is sin? It becomes, what's causing it? Quick disclaimer, this is just my thoughts, my perspective, connecting dots, asking questions, for entertainment purposes only. Yeah, you get it. But seriously, today we're starting with something that almost nobody recognizes as a problem when it shows up. Because it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like strength. It feels like clarity. It feels like you finally understand something other people don't. Like you've outgrown certain conversations, certain people, certain perspectives. And if we're being honest, that feeling can be addictive because it makes you feel solid, grounded, unshaken, like no one can move you. And again, on the surface, that's not always wrong. But here's where it shifts. Pride doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like power. Right up until it separates you from truth and starts costing you everything. That's the part people don't see coming. Because pride doesn't walk in and announce itself. It blends in. It sounds like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need advice. They just don't understand me. I've already figured this out. And the wild part is, in certain moments, you might actually be right. But pride isn't about whether you're right or wrong. It's about what happens after you decide you're right. Because confidence, real confidence, can still listen. It can still adjust. It can still say, I might be missing something. Pride can't. Pride is the moment you stop allowing correction. It's subtle at first. You start brushing off feedback. You stop asking questions. You begin filtering out anything that challenges how you see yourself or how you see the world. And over time, you don't even realize it's happening. You just feel more certain, more locked in, more convinced that you've reached a point where you don't really need input anymore. And that's where things start to shift internally. Because once you place yourself above correction, you slowly place yourself above wisdom. And once you place yourself above wisdom, you eventually place yourself above truth itself. And once that happens, you stop listening. Not because you can't hear, but because you've already decided there's nothing left to hear. You stop adjusting, not because everything is perfect, but because you've convinced yourself it is. And you stop growing, not because growth isn't available, but because you've closed yourself off from it. And here's what makes this even more dangerous. Pride doesn't always feel aggressive. Sometimes it feels calm, collected, even justified. It can sit there quietly, convincing you that you're standing in strength, when in reality, you're slowly disconnecting from the very thing that would keep you aligned. Scripture puts it plainly in the book of Proverbs. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Not as a threat, but as a pattern. Because once you remove correction, the fall isn't random anymore. It becomes inevitable. And if we're being real, this doesn't just happen on a big stage. It happens in conversations, in relationships, in those quiet moments where something in you resists being told you're wrong. You feel it in your chest, that tension, that pushback, that voice that says, don't fold, don't bend, hold your ground. And sometimes, that voice feels justified. But that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because that's where it starts. And to really understand how this plays out, not just in theory, but in real life, Let's walk through it. And again, this isn't about judging anyone. This is about recognizing patterns. Because sometimes, the clearest examples are the ones that play out in public. Take Kanye West, for example. Now, before anything else, you can't talk about his story without acknowledging the level of brilliance. We're talking about someone who didn't just succeed in an industry, he shifted it. Sound, style, production, vision. He challenged norms, broke expectations, and created things people didn't even know they wanted yet. That kind of confidence, that kind of belief in your own vision, that's not weakness. That's part of what built him. But here's where it gets complicated. Because over time, confidence can start to shift. Not all at once, not in a way that's obvious, but gradually, subtly. You start seeing moments where confidence turns into certainty, certainty turns into resistance, and resistance turns into rejection of anything that challenges you. And again, this isn't about whether he was right or wrong in every situation. That's not the point. The pattern is what matters. Because when pride starts taking hold, it doesn't just make you louder, it makes you harder to reach. You start seeing more public moments, more statements, more situations where it feels like no input is getting through. Criticism isn't processed, it's dismissed. Feedback isn't considered, it's rejected. And over time, that creates distance. Distance from people, distance from partnerships, distance from opportunities. And eventually, that distance turns into consequences. Business relationships fall apart. Public perception shifts. Doors that were once open start closing. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And from the outside, it can look confusing. Because people will say, "How did it get to this point? What happened? Why didn't someone step in?" But that's the thing about pride. It doesn't always look like collapse while it's happening. Sometimes, it looks like conviction. Sometimes, it looks like standing your ground. Sometimes, it even looks like strength. Now, to be fair, there's likely more to his story than what we see on the surface. More pressure, more experiences, more things happening behind the scenes that we don't fully understand. If the information down these rabbit holes about these industries is even partially true, the battles that many people have to face in these spaces are biblical, to say the least. But we'll circle back to that at another time, because that matters too. But even with that being said, the pattern itself is still something we can learn from. Because pride doesn't usually destroy everything overnight. It's slower than that, more subtle. It starts by removing your ability to be corrected. Then it starts removing people who would correct you. And before you realize it, you're left in a space where everything around you only reflects what you already believe. And that's dangerous. Because now, it's not just that you might be wrong. It's that there's nothing left around you that can even show you that you are. And once that happens, the outcome becomes predictable. Not because someone is forcing it, but because the system you've put yourself in no longer has anything that can pull you back into alignment. And again, this isn't just something that happens on a global stage. It happens in smaller ways, every day. In conversations where we refuse to listen. In relationships where we stop considering the other person. In moments where we choose being right over being corrected. That's the same pattern, just on a different scale. And once you start seeing it like that, you realize something. This isn't just about him. This is about us. And what happens next when that pattern continues unchecked? And this is where the pattern goes even deeper. Because what we're talking about here isn't new. This isn't just something we see in culture or in public figures. This pattern shows up all the way back at the beginning. When you look at the story of Lucifer, the description isn't weakness, it's beauty. its position, its authority. There was already power there, but the shift came when that power turned inward. I will ascend. I will exalt. I will become. And that right there is the core of pride. Not just confidence, but self-elevation above alignment. Because the moment you place yourself above the source, you disconnect from the very thing that sustains you. And once that disconnection happens, everything else starts to follow. That's why pride doesn't just affect behavior, it affects perception. You start seeing things differently, hearing things differently, interpreting everything through a lens that centers you instead of truth. And once your perception shifts, your decisions follow. And once your decisions shift, your outcomes follow. Not instantly, but inevitably. That's why the consequence of pride isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow, subtle. You lose the ability to receive correction. Then you lose the people who would correct you. Then you lose the opportunities that required you to adjust. And by the time it becomes visible, it feels like everything just started falling apart. But in reality, it started a long time ago. And this is where we have to be honest with ourselves. Because it's easy to see pride in someone else. It's easy to point at the big examples, the public moments, the obvious situations. But pride doesn't live out there. It lives in here. In the moments where we refuse to apologize. In the moments where we shut down instead of listening. In the moments where we'd rather protect our image than correct our direction. And if left unchecked, it leads to the same pattern, just on a different scale. So what's the answer? Because if pride is the elevation of self above truth, then the answer isn't tearing yourself down. It's alignment. It's what Scripture calls humility. Not thinking less of yourself, but thinking accurately about yourself. Recognizing where you're strong and where you still need correction. Being grounded enough to stand firm, but open enough to still listen. Because humility doesn't make you weak. It keeps you connected. Connected to truth. Connected to growth. Connected to the very thing that keeps you from drifting off course. And that's the difference. Pride isolates. Humility aligns. And once you start seeing that clearly, you start catching it sooner. You feel that resistance rise up, and instead of feeding it, you question it, you check it, you realign. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about being perfect. It's about staying aware, staying adjustable, staying aligned. With that being said, pride is what convinces you that you deserve more, that you've outgrown limits, that you're above restraint. And once that thought settles in, the next pattern starts to show itself. Wanting more, taking more, holding on to more than you were ever meant to. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, comment, share with your loved ones, your family now. And please, join us for our next video as we get into greed. Oh, before I let you go, there is a little song I put together about pride. Check the link in the description. I'll send you off with a little sample. Hope you like it. Well, as always, we love you. Take care, and I'll see you there.
I'll teach you how. I lift your chin before I break your spine. Tell you you're chosen just ahead of your time. I start as confidence, dress real clean. Then I teach you how to look down on everything. I'll make you strong, at least that's the pitch. Till you stop listening, stop learning, stop bending an inch. I whisper you don't need help. you don't need grace, then I'll leave you alone in first place. I am the fallacy of pride.